This book might change the way you think about the GSC. What is up, everybody? Welcome back. If I am looking a little bit stiff today, that's because I am. I actually injured myself while working out the other day, so if I'm doing a little bit of a Batman maneuver, it's just because I'm trying to keep my neck straight and steady. Be careful out there, guys. World's a dangerous place when you least expect it. But anyway, my hobbying has taken a bit of a backseat because of that. I am on the road to recovery, but being hunched over a hobby desk is just not really what I feel like I should be doing at the current moment. However, that does give me plenty of time to read some books. Speaking of today's talk, we're doing a lore review of Day of Ascension by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I believe that's how that's pronounced. A book that takes a look at the Gene Stealer cults. As you may know, this is the year of the Xeno for me as I delve into my army numero dos, the Gene Stealer cults themselves. And if you don't know that much about them, that's okay. They're on the fringe, I think, of most people's understanding. But this is a really good introduction to them as a faction and as a society. See, the Gene Stealer cults are really, truly awful, terrible people. Their entire job is to prep a planet for an alien invasion, hostile. They're going to be consuming everything, all forms of life on the planet and leaving it a barren husk. And they do this by, on the proper day, the quote-unquote Day of Ascension, basically undermining the planet's defenses, sowing confusion and panic around the populace, and in general countermanding any potential military response that a planet may have to this alien invasion. The catch, though, is they don't realize that they're doing it. They're a highly misled, misguided religious cult who worships these aliens as their true kind of gods and angels. And it's really interesting to get a book written from that perspective, from the perspective of those people with boots on the ground. You see, the Imperium isn't a good place to live at all. It is the, grim darkness of the far future after all, and there is only war. And that means for the normal citizen on the Imperium's billions and billions of planets, life is just an endless menial slog until you probably die working. Not a great way to live your life. And so in the Gene Stealer cult, you get a lot of this idea of hope for a better future. That hope, entirely misguided as it is one that is kind of sympathetic to many revolutionary movements throughout history and existing today. And it's not hard to imagine that these downtrodden workers, because that is who they essentially amount to, is the menials, the proletariats toiling away in the factories, uprising against those who kind of virtually enslave them in a sort of wage debt. It is very interesting to read this book in which there truly are no heroes. There are protagonists and antagonists, and the book largely follows two protagonists who are operating against each other. And I think that's a very interesting structure to take as we delve into these opposing forces and learn how they operate against each other, competing on polar opposites in terms of their goals, thinking that they're outplaying the other one the entire time. It's a very interesting way to write a book in which there are clearly no good guys at all. Everyone is doing bad stuff for bad reasons, and everyone thinks that they're the right person and they're doing the right thing. It's just a whole messy soup of misguidedness and entitlement and a lot of kind of really interesting political mirrors to how I can kind of see society functioning today. And so I think it's a really cool book to discover that although the large protagonists, those of the Gene Stealer cult, are thinking themselves as heroes, they are doing so to such terrible and horrifying ends that we even only get a glimpse of at the very end of the book. It's a very short read, coming in at just under 200 pages, so something that you can breeze through in probably just a couple of days. But I would recommend checking it out if you have even a peripheral interest in this sort of Xeno sub-faction, or you're interested in learning more about it. I think this is a great kind of entry point into that lore. I myself, trying to come up with this army, I was honestly stuck on ideas and inspiration for how I wanted to homebrew my faction until I read this book, and it made a direction all that much clearer for me to take by portraying them as more sympathetic characters than any of even like their codex does in the fiction. That's not to say this is a perfect book. It does hit one of my main pet peeves when reading Warhammer fiction, which is when it refers to combatants by sort of like their game piece on the board, rules slate in the codex names. Like this sort of worker girl is worried that she's going to be seeing some Sicarian rust stalkers approaching her position soon. And I don't know why a girl working in the mines would, or a girl who cleans the palace would know specifically what the name of that is. It's always just kind of a little bit immersion breaking. But on the converse of that, they handle the culture and naming of the cultists themselves extremely well, referring to a lot of the more weird creations that this cult can produce, as things like aunts and uncles and great aunts and great uncles, and there's a whole sort of like familial angle to it, which I found really cool and very on point for something like this. But then they go around and just kind of break that form immediately by referring to units by like their kind of codex specific name, which for me, it just seems that like it's like someone who sees a chaos demon for the first time ever and they're like, oh, it's a Khorne bloodletter. No, they wouldn't be saying that. They'd be like screaming their head off because it's an aberration against nature, you know? But that is just my own personal pet peeve. In general, it doesn't really take away from the core of the story, which is still a very interesting game of cat on mouse, on cat again, back on the mouse, and you never really know who's going to end up winning until the very end. And it kind of keeps you glued to the pages until that happens. Overall, a pretty good recommendation for me. A couple of the characters had a few really nice standout moments. The kind of super entitled Mechanicus is operating at a much more nefarious angle than we typically see them being in fiction, which I thought was kind of refreshing, and it's nice to see them as competent antagonists and not just the power-hungry, bumbling idiots that they're sometimes portrayed as. Of course, they are still ignorant of a lot of things. That's kind of one of their entire whole purposes of their premise, but that is, I think, navigated in a way that still presents them as a foe to be feared and a strong challenge to overcome from these sort of indentured servants working in the mines and manufacturers. As for the cultist characters themselves, they kind of stylize them as like folk hero types, and at least the main ones are kind of that sort of community, sort of grassroots driven icons that, you know, people like that do exist today and things like that. And it's a very kind of refreshing take, I think, on the cult as a whole. And although they're doing very horrendous things for the planet, they genuinely believe that they are helping everybody else out. And they even conscript the help of just normal dudes, normal people who are sick and tired of the Imperium. And I think that's a very kind of realistic thing, because it's very clear that no one on this planet actually likes being there doing what they're doing. So overall, in lore, I think this is both a refreshing and accurate take on the Gene Stealer cult kind of story, how they grab hold of a planet and don't let go until it's way too late. And I think it's a very interesting spin on the construction of the narrative in whole. Because it's so short, I would give it an easy recommendation, although maybe wait until it's out in paperback, as the hardcover is a little bit pricier than a perhaps 200-page story might be worth. Overall, though, very enjoyable read, and aside from my pet peeve of people describing things that they see with the Codex standard names that they should not know, it gets a pass. For me, I would probably rate it at a 3 out of 5, 4 out of 5 if you're particularly interested in the cult itself. But that is all for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed that little review. I had a lot of fun reading the book, and hopefully I can get back into hobbying soon. There is a lot of fun stuff I want to do this year, and I want to start off on the right foot once I get healed up and can get back to my kit bashing, painting, all of those hobby goals that we went over in the last video. I've already made a little bit of progress on that, so hopefully we can do better than we did last year. As always, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like in the comments. Leave a like or comment, or both, actually. And make sure you stay subscribed so you don't miss even a single video. And I will see you guys next time. Peace!